Hello my bullet journal friend, it's Erin here, ready to get set up for March 2023 in my bullet journal. My last few themes have been very floral and I am staying within the floral realm, although I'm leaning away from the vintage vibes this time and going for something a little bit more bold and striking. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do for this theme, I actually was considering going way back to basics and just using black and white. But while I was sketching everything out, I remembered the washi tape that's going to be the hero. Well, actually it's a PET tape, it's a clear one. That is going to be the hero of this theme, and I was like, oh no, that has to happen because March is the beginning of autumn here in Australia and the rest of the southern hemisphere. I know it's coming into spring for those of you in the northern hemisphere, and I feel like this PET tape is just the perfect balance of both of those seasons. I've started out by lettering the word March. I'm actually doing kind of a negative space thing here, so I wanted very bold, very sharp edges on a sans serif font for the March lettering, and I've put a box around it and I'm colouring in. I'm using the Tombow Fudenosuke brushed pen for this. I'm going to switch to a different pen for the other places in this setup where I'll be doing this that's a little bit faster than this one. But I'm just using that pen to colour in within the box around the letters so they are left empty for now. We will fill them in soon. March will actually be my first full month in my bullet journal for 2023 because I've been away travelling. I'm on the very last leg of my trip now. I'll be home in a few days' time, so I can't wait to get into this theme. I'm so ready to use it. I'm using a green metallic paint pen from ARTISTRO from their set of brush tip paint markers, just to go within that negative space that we left earlier, colour in the letters so they are this beautiful foresty green. It's got a little bit of a kind of khaki olive tone to it, this one, which is not the kind of colours that I usually lean towards, but I think it's going to work so beautifully with the tape that we're going to use later. Also, if any of the supplies I'm using in this video catch your eye, tickle your fancy, jump into the description down below. I have got links to everything I'm using that can be linked down there for you, so you can also get your hands on anything that you might like to have in your own stationery collection. Are you ready for the hero of this setup? Here it is. This is the Morning Dew wide PET tape from the Washi tape shop. They do also have a washi version if you prefer it to not be on the clear plastic kind of sticky. I'm just going to cut pieces. The way this washi/PET tape is designed, it has these little clusters of flowers and leaves and butterflies that are kind of separate from each other on the tape. They aren't actually stickers, but you can use them like stickers if you trim around the outside. So they're their own little self-contained sections of flower, which I think is really cool. If you lay it down just as a straight tape, not using it like stickers the way I am, then it will still look absolutely beautiful. But if you want to get in there and get a bit more detailed, you can trim around things like this and end up with something very creative and different. So that's always fun. I'm trimming around the outside of mine, working out where I want it to sit in relation to the March header, and then trimming out a little right angle corner so that I can pop it at the corners of my March heading, and it will look like the flowers are exploding out from behind the lettering, which is really cool. The tape is quite delicate though, so if you need to peel it up, if you're not happy with where you've placed it, you need to be really careful. I actually tore the one in the top left-hand corner there as I was trying to peel it back up because I wasn't happy with my placement for it, so do be careful with that. Also, if you've just fallen in love with this PET tape and you want to get it for yourself, I do have a discount code for the Washi tape shop. It's an affiliate code, so if you use it to make a purchase, I'll make a little bit of money, which is very much appreciated. It is Erin Smith 10, and that will get you 10% off on anything you like at the Washi tape shop. I've left the rest of the cover page quite empty because I wanted that to really pop, that design in the center. So we're moving on now to the calendar spread. And I'm just placing down 2 rectangles on the far right sides of the page that I'm going to fill in with black. This time I'm using a Tombow Jewel brush pen in black instead of the Tombow Fudenosuke because it has a softer and a bigger brush tip, so it can get more surface area in one go. The one I'm using here is the N25. And these black boxes are serving as a vessel for where the PET tape stickers will go. Once I've got the calendar in place, I'm also using another Tombow dual tip brush pen here. It's the Warm Grey 020, just to outline each of the boxes for each day of the month of March. I wanted everything to be really clean and crispy this month, so I'm using a ruler for all of my lines. I don't always do that, but when the layout calls for it, I'm happy to use a ruler. You just need to make sure that you're cleaning it off, just wiping it on some spare paper or on some paper towel or something like that as you go, especially when you're using black markers or fine liners and that kind of thing, because the ink will transfer to your fingertips and then it can smudge on the page. So you need to be careful with your fingers and also careful with your ruler. I'm using the super tiny Pigma Micron 01 pen, which is very, very small and fine, just to add the number for each day of March above each of the boxes. And then I'm going to use that same green paint pen that we used for the lettering on the cover spread to stamp the letters for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday above each of the columns here, so I know where I am in the month. I always like to start my weeks on a Monday, but I still like to have the little prompt there, just in case I forget. I don't know why I would forget, but I do like to have it. All this spread needs now is a little bit of floral decoration to finish it off, and then we will move on to the next spread. The pages we're about to set up have turned out to be, I think, my favorites in this whole layout. Right now we're working on the goals, musings, and favorites page on the left side, and the right side's going to be my spending log. I'm still going to lay down some black in order to have a little bit of a background for the florals to sit on top of, but I found this piece of black origami paper in my stationery collection, and I thought that's a bit easier than colouring it all in by hand, so I'm slicing it with this little paper cutter into strips that are the correct size for the places I want to put them on the page, which is above and below the functional elements here, and I'm just trimming them to the right length, and this way I don't have to colour it all in with a brush pen, which is fantastic. And I think it looks cleaner overall. I just wish I had more of the paper, because I could have done that for all of the black spots in this particular setup rather than colouring some of them in, but we will have to go back to the colouring system in a minute because I only have so much black paper to work with. The boxes on the left page, I have goals, musings, and favourites. The goals section is quite self-explanatory. I use it to break down my yearly goals into more achievable, sort of smaller monthly goals to try and keep me on track to the bigger ones. The musing section is just for whatever I'm thinking at the time, things that are on my mind. I just kind of jot down here in a kind of shorthand way. I do also have a long form journal that I use whenever I feel like I need to get some thoughts out. And the little box in the bottom left is for favorites, so anything that I'm enjoying at the moment, music, food, TV shows, movies, particular pens, whatever it is, can go in that spot. And it's just a nice thing to look back on in the future. I'm stamping my headings again with the same green ARTISTRO brush pen and my capital letter stamps. I liked the uppercase ones this time. Most of the time I reach for lowercase letter stamps, but I was just feeling the boldness this time around of an all caps heading. My spending log page on the right here is sticking to my usual convention, but slightly differently at the same time. So the way I set this up is I have two tables of 3 columns, item, category, and cost for each of them, and I usually separate the tables so there's a little gap in between, but this time I've just merged them together. So there's still 2 tables, but it looks like one big table of 6 columns. It's not, just so you know. I just really wanted the dimensions of the table to mirror the dimensions of the boxes on the opposite page for not quite symmetry, but something close to symmetry, and that's why I've tackled it this way this time. In order to keep the solid black theme going, I'm using my black marker again to colour in the top row, and a white paint pen. This one I recently cleaned because it had dried out a bit, and now it's a bit too enthusiastic, so I have to keep wiping off the excess before I can use it without having sort of a pool of white paint overwhelming my page. When I'm using stamps for my lettering, I often like to start from the middle of the word so that I can make sure things are centered quite well, but it backfires on me sometimes, like in this instance where I forget how a word is spelled and I skip a letter. Thankfully in this case, because I was stamping onto black paper, I can just color over it with a black paint pen, and I can really get away with it quite well. It did need a couple of layers of black, but once it dried down enough, I just stamped over the top again, and you can tell, but it's subtle. Next up we have a tracker spread, so on the left page we have my habit tracker. I really wanted to stick to this bold system. I didn't want to use my usual PHOMEMO printed calendars this time because I didn't think they would quite suit the look I was going for. Instead I've gone for this table setup, quite similar to the spending tracker actually. So along the top here, the section I'm colouring in black right now is for each of the habits. I've got space to track 6 habits here, and rather than writing the word for the habit this time, I'm doing a little illustration. This is Mitsu, come to supervise. He's a very good supervising journal cat. My doodles are maybe not great, but they do the job. So the first one is a barbell for exercise. The second one is a $sign with a line through it for no spending. The next one is a tooth for flossing. And then I have a little nose, which is to remind me to use a nasal spray that I need for allergies. And I've added another black column on the left side, which is where the initial and the number for each day of the month will go. Then once again, adding the PET tape around the edges, on the corners and along the sides, just cutting it down so that it once again seems to be springing from behind the elements. I'm also going to stamp my heading again at the top, and this time I managed to spell everything correctly, which is always nice. And now all we need is the numbers and the initial for each day. My mood tracker for this month is kind of a variation on a style that I use quite often. I'll usually do blobs all over the page to represent a blob for each day of the month, and within those blobs I'll doodle a little floral illustration kind of thing. This is the exact same concept, it's just that I'm using black boxes this time that are much more rigid rather than blobs which are very soft and round. Once again using my ruler to make sure all of my lines are nice and sharp, and once I hit 31 down the bottom, I've got 5 days to each row here, I've just used the rest of the space to add a section to put my key, so I can put my doodles down there so I know which one stands for which mood. And I'll use my white paint pen to draw in the doodle every day that best matches my mood. I'm only doing 3 moods, but if I feel somewhere that falls in between the ones I've allocated here, you can also just blend the doodles together, which is a pretty cool thing as well. So it's nice to have a bit of an artistic outlet day to day. Even if you've had a terrible day, you still get to make something pretty. As much as I love how striking all of this black looks on the page, it is quite time consuming, so I will show you how I'm doing this a little bit here first, but you don't actually need to see me do all of these boxes, so we're just going to fast forward a little bit here in time and carry on with all of these boxes filled in. Ah, the magic of editing. Since these mood tracker squares are not following a traditional calendar setup where the week starts on a Monday or anything like that, I'm adding the initial alongside the number for each day of the month just above each box, and I was a bit worried about smearing all that fresh black ink, so I've used a piece of plastic that's left over from a greeting card just to act as a bit of a barrier between my hand and the page. And now I'm adding my 3 mood doodles down the bottom in the key section. And of course we'll need to add a little bit of floral decoration to this spread as well. But it already has quite a lot going on, so I didn't want to overwhelm the page, so I'm just going to add a little bit at the top either side of the mood header. My old friend, the content planner. This spread is invaluable to me. I like to set up a calendar spread with extra large boxes every month so that I can plan out all of my social media and YouTube content in advance, and that really helps me stay on schedule and make sure that I'm not losing track of anything. It's really helpful for me. I'm using a Pigma Micron to draw out my lines this time just because I was a bit sick of all of the transfer onto my fingers from the Tombow. I do think this would look wonderful with thicker, very striking lines for each of these calendar boxes, but I just didn't want to do it, so here we are. The Pigma Micron works just as well. Calendar layout is always going to lean a little bit more to the left or the right, depending on how you like to set it up. I always like to have mine have 4 boxes on the left page, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday fall on the left page, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on the right page because I prefer writing on the left side of the book than the right. So I'm adding another black box on the right side that matches the height of the calendar, and it's here once again to be a vessel for the beautiful florals that are the feature of this whole theme. I think it looks best when you can see a little bit of the black box peeking out from behind the florals, so I'm trying to make sure that you can always see just a little bit. I thought the page was looking a little unbalanced, so I've added a couple more floral stickers around just to keep things looking more consistent, and then we will move on to the final spread for this setup. This is the first of my weekly spreads. Before I headed off on my holiday, I was in the habit of doing a monthly live stream where we set up all of the weeklies for the coming month, and I'm so excited to be able to get back into that for this month. So if you'd like to come to any of my live streams and hang out while we do the rest of the weeklies for March or for any other month throughout the rest of this year, do make sure you hit subscribe so you can see when I schedule those. I usually like to give you at least a day's notice, so keep an eye out for the March live stream coming soon. This weekly layout is one of my absolute go-tos. You have 8 boxes on the page. You only need 7, obviously, for a week, unless you like to wrap your weeks over so they don't always start on a Monday or a Sunday or however you prefer. So of course, I've colored in the first one black, and I'm going to put some florals over it, and that's going to be the way the weekly crumbles. Or the cookie, if you prefer the cookie to crumble instead of the weekly. Just flipping back to February here to check, the last couple of days of February will actually wrap around onto this weekly because I like to start my weeks on a Monday and I like to keep my weeks fully together. More of the days of this week fall in March than fall in February, so that means this weekly goes within the March setup. Again, just having the florals in that one corner feels a little bit too unbalanced to me, so I'm going to add a little bit more. I've never used my craft knife with this PET tape before, so I wasn't sure how much pressure to use, but the idea here is that I would stick down a section and then use my craft knife to cut along the weekly box lines, and then it will look like the flowers are again appearing from behind the functional elements on the page. Turned out I wasn't using quite enough force, so the first one was quite difficult because it hadn't cut all the way through the tape, so it sort of just tore. But once I got in there with a little bit more force, this was actually really easy to do, so I stuck another one on the opposite page as well. Here it is, it's flip through time. I hope you've enjoyed planning with me for March 2023. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like down below. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more of this kind of thing from me. I do make new videos about bullet journaling and stationery every single Friday Australian time, so I'd love to see you next week for my next video too, if you'd like. Until then, take care, have a great week and happy planning. Bye!